All right, guys, good night. This is Pastor Rachel coming to you live from my dining room table. So we are in week 3 of our sermon series on empathy. And before I dive into the sermon, a few quick reminders about announcements. Monday night, our prayer group continues. Tuesday night, the women's group meets at the church and online in our digital discipleship forum. So check out our website for the times on those. Wednesday is Fresh Food Wednesday. Make sure you show up to help participate and volunteer with that. And on Thursday night, band and choir practice, finance committee meeting. Friday night, messy church. So come join us for hot dogs and a great interactive worship service for kids of all ages. It's going to be a really busy week. And then Sunday we have our winter jam event, so you'll want to be a part of that as well. So lots going on. And our gardeners, if you're a gardener, we are doing a quick gardening project next Sunday after church, after the 10:15 service. So phew, it's been a busy day, but I'm glad you guys are joining us. All right. So this week we're going to talk about how to teach empathy to our children. And again, most of the sermons come from scripture, but it's based on a lot of the work by Dr. Helen Reese called The Empathy Effect that just came out in this last year. And in it, she spends a lot of time about how hard it is for a lot of kids today to truly empathize, to understand what it's like for those who suffer or feel overwhelmed or fail because of 2 really popular parenting techniques. Okay, so you might have heard of helicopter parenting, right? Where we hover near our kids just to make sure the moment they fall or face any type of adversity, we're there to swoop them up, comfort them, and make all the bad things go away. Well, he says, okay, or she says, helicopter parenting is bad. And then also lawnmower parenting is a new thing where you don't even want your kids to fall before you swoop in. You want to mow down that lawn. You want to like smooth that path so their entire life there are no bumps or bruises along the way. Everything goes according to plan. And while both of those parenting styles come from a heart of love and not wanting to see a child that you care about suffer, they also make it really difficult for that child to, so Athena, stop. I'm gonna just take her out of the view there. My dog is entertaining. So they might come from a place of love, but they do keep our kids from being able to understand what it's like when life doesn't go according to plan. So unless you're expecting to live forever or have your kids live forever in a bubble, it's great to let them, this is tip number 1 for teaching our kids empathy, we have to let our kids feel the consequences of their actions. So if they, break something in the house, tell them to fix it or help pay for the repair cost. If they refuse to pick up their dirty clothes from the floor, do not do it for them. Wash their clothes, Marie Kondo fold them and put them back in their drawers. No, let them go without clean clothes or without, and until they learn that process. Again, it has to be age appropriate, but if we look throughout scripture, we see God as loving, right, and kind. We see a God all throughout the Old Testament where we are not faithful and we are not obedient to God's plans, and yet God keeps loving us over and over and over and giving us more and more and more chances until finally, God's people experience the exile. But we also see many other examples where God does let people feel the consequences of their actions. So for instance, let's start in the book of Genesis. When Adam and Eve ate that fruit from that stupid tree, God's response was not, now, Adam and Eve, okay, this is your first warning. Don't do that again. That fruit is off limits. It's going to hurt your tummy. It's going to hurt your mind and your heart. No, they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, right? They could not go back, and it changed everything. Sin and disease and death, all of that came to pass. That's a massive consequence, right, for the actions. So God is not a lawnmower God. You can look at the story of Lot's wife, where the angels told all of Lot's family, the wife included, do not turn around, do not look back. And she does, and my heart kind of goes out to her because I'm like, you know what, if I was Lot's wife and I had just minutes to pack up my entire life, I might look back wondering if I left the stove on or if I forgot to lock the front door or dropped a sock along the path. But bottom line, when she turned around, she knew what she was doing was wrong. It was against the rules. She turned to a pillar of salt. What about Moses? I mean, oh my goodness, what a great leader in the Old Testament. The only one who spoke to God face to face, right? And Moses takes on the Pharaoh and says, let my people go, and leads them through the Red Sea. And then for years and years and decades is in the wilderness with God's people, hearing them whine and complain, and dies just outside of the promised land. What is that all about? Well, if you look back to Numbers 20 and see what transpired, what consequence had to come as a result of Moses' actions. The people were complaining, they were thirsty, they wanted water for themselves and for their livestock. And God said, okay, go to this rock and tell the rock to spring forth water, and the people and the livestock will have all the water they need. And so Moses goes, takes the staff the way God told him, but instead of speaking to the rock, he taps the rock with his staff after saying, do we have to do everything for you around here? Not, does God have to do everything for you, but do we? So now don't look to me, don't look to God, people, look to me, because God and I, we're like this, like we do everything together. And in fact, I'm just going to kind of bring you water my own way tonight. So God says, because you didn't trust in me, because you didn't trust in me and my promises, you won't be a part of the promised land. That's a consequence. If we look at King David, the man after God's own heart, he made some big mistakes that we discussed last week, and God forgave him. And yet when your kids see you live a life driven by lust and power, that's the lesson they learn. And so we'll talk a little bit later about some of the repercussions and the consequences of David's actions upon his family members, those he cared about and loved. And what about, we got to get a New Testament example in there, right? So what about Ananias and Sapphira? So in Acts chapter 5, in the early church, people who had more means, more wealth, would frequently give that money to the church to help distribute among the poor, right? Great practice. So this guy named Barnabas sells his land and gives 100% of that money to the church, like give this to people who need it. So Ananias and Sapphira are like, oh, two can play at that game. So they sell some land, but rather than give all of it to the church, which they say they're giving all of it to the church, they hold back some as a rainy day fund. So when they go into worship and they bring, Ananias goes first. We don't know where Sapphira was, but Ananias goes in first and presents the money to Peter. And Peter says, this is all the money from the sale of your house? And Ananias is like, oh yeah, dude, like every penny. And he's like struck dead on the spot. That's really big consequence. Sapphira obviously doesn't know what's happened to her husband. A couple hours later, she walks in. Can you imagine what the congregation was acting like how quiet it must have been in there as they were waiting to see what Sapphira's response would be? Because Peter says, okay, Sapphira, how much money did you and Ananias get from the land? And Sapphira says the exact same amount Ananias did, which was a lie. And so she too is struck dead, and her body is taken out of the worship service there. And I bet everybody giving their offering that day gave exactly the amount that they said they were going to give. So the crime, the punishment was not that they didn't give all that they owned to God, but that they lied about it. Why say you're doing something and then not honor your word to God? That's a big deal. So we look at these consequences, and it's important for us in cultivating empathy in the ones we love, our own children or our nieces and nephews or grandkids or kids that we are just mentoring, to teach them the consequences of their actions. Yes, we love you. Yes, we forgive you, but it doesn't mean that we can take away your mistake in its entirety. Okay, the next step is to learn about twinship. So I'm going to break it to you, if you have a kid age 12 or older, that you're still very important to your child, and yet psychologically, sociologically, spiritually speaking, around age 12, Dr. Reese talks about this, twinship happens where your kids no longer turn to you as the main person they want to impress or whose approval they seek. They turn to their peers. So they don't care what I think about, my son will not care what I think about his clothes when he's 12 years old. He will care what the other boys or girls in his class think about what he's wearing. And in terms of what's right and wrong and what to do and what's important in life, it's about those kids that they connect with. Oh, we have sports in common. We have scouts in common. We have whatever, Fortnite or who knows, hopefully helping people and saving the world in common. But that's what gets us into this twinship thing. So we have to learn about twinship and see around that age, but even before that, who our kids are drawn to, who they see themselves mirrored in, who they want a relationship with. And if those friends are no good, do something about it, okay? So the story I have for you is a story tied in with King David. So here's our goal, parents, okay? We want our kids to have Hushi's over Ahithophels. Hushi's over Ahithophels. What does that mean? Okay, so King David, his son Absalom, decides to usurp the throne, take daddy's power away. And so while he's trying to stage this coup, David has like this core group of these wise leaders, these close friends that he turns to. Help me, my son is trying to like kill me and kick me out of the temple. What do I do? And so as Absalom is starting this whole revolt, Ahithophel, who is known as like a wise counselor to King David, betrays him. He's like, oh, peace out, dude. And he joins Absalom's camp. And David is just like heartbroken. Like, how on earth can Ahithophel do this? I thought he knew me. I thought he had my back. So at the same time, Hushai is another like wise leader, not a wise guy necessarily, but a military commander who says, let me go, let me help. I'll be like a double agent for you in Absalom's camp. So as Absalom is like, I don't know, my dad is on the run. Should I just finish him off and kill him as he's fleeing Jerusalem? Hushai's like, oh, no, that's not a good idea. That makes no sense, Absalom. I'm here for you, man. And I think you should let David live and just battle him another day. And so he saves David's life. David gets away. Eventually he gets the throne back. Absalom does not. And so we want our kids to have Hushais and not Ahithophels in their life. We want friends that will really be there when times are tough, that can really help preserve and protect, save the lives of those that we love the most instead of betraying them. Okay, so tip number 3 is to live or die by the 3-to-1 or 5-to-1 ratio. What is that? It's not only used with parenting, but it's also used in marriage in general. Any relationship that matters to you in your life, you feel closest to the people who have the most positive or kind things to say about you, right? On an average of 3 positive things to every 1 negative thing, or ideally 5 positive things to every negative thing. We read in Proverbs 16:24, pleasant words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the body. Proverbs 18:20 says, from the fruit of the mouth, one's stomach is satisfied. The yield of the lips brings satisfaction. So we can truly build each other up and encourage each other with our words. And we're called to do this substantially more than we nag or are negative to those that we care about. So when you're trying to cultivate empathy in the lives of the little ones around you, if they feel like you don't really care or respect or see any redemptive quality in them, they're going to be less likely to be open, share their feelings, and process things with you. It's not as safe of an environment. So help them learn, say, and do it in a fair and honest and loving way, right? Kids can tell when we're just feeding them lines. So don't say, oh, Johnny, you are the best son ever on the face of the earth. No one is smarter or more handsome than you. Could you please pick up your clothes? Because that won't really resonate with little Johnny's heart. But if you say, you know what, Johnny, what I've loved is seeing how responsible you've been today. You put your dish in the sink this morning. When you got home from school, you hung up your jacket and you're starting your homework. I love all of that. What I noticed is all your dirty clothes are still on the floor upstairs. Could you put those in the hamper sometime this afternoon before dinner? That will get a better response. Johnny will feel like, oh, wow, they care about me. They've seen what I've done well and right, and they're encouraging me to continue that. So make sure that you live by the 3-to-1 or 5-to-1 ratio. And our final tip is to listen to our kids. That's such a gift for empathy. True understanding of each other's stories and each other's hearts and feelings and experiences can only come when we're truly listening to each other. And our kids, kids in any sense, your own children, nieces, nephews, grandkids, kids that you're mentoring are dying to be heard. So yes, there will be days where you are exhausted and the last thing you want to hear is how cool Chase is on Paw Patrol, or what crazy thing happened in homeroom. But the more that you are engaged in their life, now there's always an appropriate time, right? Like if I'm busy burning dinner and one of my kids wants to talk to me right then and there, I will tell them to wait while I put out the fire and order takeout, and then they can talk to me. So they don't always get access exactly when they want to, but my son knew I was going to be doing this FaceTime Live sermon, and he said, hey, when you're done with that, can we have a heart-to-heart? I love that. And you better believe I'm going to listen to every single word that comes from my amazing child's mouth. And so a great way to listen is to literally just repeat back the exact words that you hear, not just kids, but this is a tip that can work in any relationship in your life. Repeat back the words that they're saying to them. So, if my daughter says, I had a great day at school today, Mom, my response would be, wow, I heard you say you had a great day today. And she'll be like, yes, I did. You understand. And it's like, yes, it's not rocket science, and yet it is, because you have to intentionally remember exactly what they said and repeat it back to them. Or, if someone I care about says, I had the worst day of my entire life, I'll say, wow, you had the worst day of your entire life? Tell me more about that. And just repeating back those words lets them feel safe to share. And we serve a God, my friends, who knows what we're feeling too, who listens to us, who like created and designed us to be closely connected to God. So if we read Psalm 139, 1-4, it says, "Oh Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down, when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down. You are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, oh Lord, you know it completely." We serve a God who knows exactly what we're going to say, but longs for us to cry out in prayer and say, "God, let me tell you what's going on in me and what I need and the hope that I can find only in you." And the people around us in our lives, especially these little lives entrusted to us, are waiting for that kind of relationship as well. Like, know me, care about me, see me, hear me. When maybe we're tired and overwhelmed and what they're saying is not as exciting. Or even more importantly, when our kids open up and say, I remember the look on my parents' face when I was like, "So instead of coming home after prom, I ended up at this party and I'd like to talk about it." They could have totally freaked out and like locked me in my room and grounded me for the next decade. But instead they were like, "Oh, let's talk about that. What happened?" And we were able to talk and process, and I was able to learn as they empathized with me and I empathized with them, and was able to grow from that experience. So I don't know what your story is. I don't know what you're facing at home, but know that you're not alone. God is with you. Your church family is with you. And together we can do really great things. So may you take some time this week to help those that you care about feel the consequences of their actions. May you learn more about the friends, the peers that you have around you and that the little ones in your life do. And may you just continue to learn and grow in your ability to listen to the stories of others as you encourage them more than you criticize. And I will see you guys here next Sunday. Next Sunday is going to be a great sermon. It's talking about how the digital age has both helped and hurt us when it comes with our ability to empathize. So sermon you don't want to miss. Check it out next week. Bye.